Today, let's get a quick update on what's happening with the status on redistricting across the different states. There's so much going on as different states try to get an advantage even late in the game after elections have already started to take place, and so many of them get put on hold in the courts, then they get appealed and overturned. It's hard to follow it all, but let's do a quick rundown. Here's the summary on New York Times as of May 26th. So Texas was the first state to really get going, and it looks like they're going to pick up between 2 to 5 seats. Now, initially this was stated to be 5 seats, and in a red-leaning year, maybe even a neutral one, that would probably be the case. But because it looks like it's going to be blue-leaning, New York Times thinks Republicans might come out with as few as just 2 seats. Now we'll go through these states real quick one by one in just a minute, but the other big Republican states getting in on the action are Florida. The outcome there is not totally clear, but if it does go through, Republicans would gain 3 to 4 more seats. In Ohio, they might come out with 0 seats, but they could gain up to 2. That map turned out to just be a bit of a tweak for the Republicans, and not a dramatic overall to guarantee Dems are totally shut out. Missouri, Republicans all but certain to pick up 1 seat there as the map goes from 6 to 2 to 7 to 1. In Tennessee, we all just heard about that one. Republicans look like they're going up to a 9 to 0 map from 8 to 1. In North Carolina, Republicans look like they're going to squeeze out 1 more seat potentially, but if it's a blue wave, Don Davis in that northeastern seat, he could hang on yet again. In Utah, that state's a little bit different. That's going in the other direction. The state Supreme Court there looks like they're going to uphold a map here that is going to give Dems 1 seat. That gets complicated because there was a ballot initiative that took away partisan gerrymandering. But through all the different legal battles, it looks like the final result for this year at least is Dems are going to get 1 seat here in this red state. And of course, California coming in after Texas. They did take it to the voters. Dems could come out with 5 more seats, but New York Times says at least 3. And on that map, with more than 50 seats, Republicans are going to have very, very few of them. Couple more states still in the works here, Alabama, but that one technically hit a roadblock in the courts, and it looks like the current map, which gives Dems 2 seats, that might actually stand for this cycle. Louisiana is still finalizing things that could give Republicans 1 more seat there. So in the end, Republicans might come out with as few as 3 more seats, but it might go all the way up to 12, depending on what happens. So a lot of range there, but at least a small edge for the Republicans. Probably not going to be enough in a blue-leaning environment, but it's also going to get super crazy next year after this midterm. Dems probably going to try to squeeze even more out of their blue states. But if you want to read about each of the states, you could do so here on New York Times. But let's run through these states and see what the final result is. Well, in Texas, the U.S. Supreme Court has allowed the new map to stay in place. So that's pretty much the end of it. In California, the same thing. There was a ballot initiative. The voters did approve it. The U.S. Supreme Court did not step in. That map is going to stand. In Missouri, like in a lot of these states, it's gone through different courts and different things have happened. But ultimately, back in March, the state Supreme Court allowed the map to stand. But if you go down here, it was close. It was a 4-3 decision. And they say that the state constitution does not preclude lawmakers from drawing a map mid-decade. Then there was another state Supreme Court decision just the other day, and this ruling is on something a little bit different. It's about calling a special session to redraw the maps, and this time the ruling was unanimous. In North Carolina here, we've got a 3-judge panel. That's going to be an appeals court. They're allowing this new map to stand. Republicans could gain 1 more seat there. Again, that's the Don Davis seat. In a blue-leaning year, there's a chance he still holds on. Then if we go back to Utah, there was an initiative to try to repeal that bipartisan commission to redraw the maps. There was a signature gathering process. In the end, Republicans actually failed to pull it off. But that's why this map is going to stand at least for this cycle. But in case you didn't hear, it looks like there was also an effort to expand the state Supreme Court there. They're going to go from 5 to 7 justices. That could ultimately be a boost for Republicans after the midterms to redraw those maps again in their favor. How about Ohio? They had a different process. They also have a commission, and they apparently ruled unanimously to use the new map that does favor the Republicans. But again, it's not overwhelming. The Dems would rather have this than an all-out complete wipeout for their side. In Tennessee, we've got an appeals court. They upheld the new maps. So unless the Supreme Court decides to quickly jump in and overturn this ruling, Republicans likely to go up to a 9 to 0 map here. Dems hope that there's an outside chance in a big enough blue wave they could still flip one of these seats. Now here's a state. We've got Maryland. You might have heard a couple of months ago that the state Senate president decided he doesn't want to take up redistricting. Now that's a 7 to 1 map. There's 1 Republican there, but they could be drawn out if Dems take control. However, the state Supreme Court there does have enough appointees of former Governor Larry Hogan, the Republican. And like a lot of these states, the districts are not supposed to overtly favor one party or the other. But a lot of times the courts just bypass that altogether. But there could be a change of heart here in this state. Dems might take it up again. Could be after the midterms, but they would easily pick up 1 more seat here. In South Carolina, this effort looks like it fell short. That would have squeezed out the last remaining Democrat in the state, Jim Clyburn. Possibly would have been risky. Republicans could have endangered one of their own. Maybe it gets taken up after the midterms, but for now it looks like that effort is dead and the current map is going to stay in effect. In Florida, again, there's already supposed to be an anti-gerrymandering amendment in place, but the state Supreme Court has a ton of DeSantis appointees, and the new map that would give Republicans a few more seats here could absolutely go into effect, but there's a chance the court strikes it down. I know Dems in Virginia are really hoping the same thing happens in this state. In Indiana, there was an effort to redraw the maps there, but that fell flat also. Of course, several state senators did get primaried out in the recent election. It could happen again. Republicans would gain at least one seat here. There's an outside chance they would go for a clean sweep and get all 9. Back to Louisiana, this is still currently in the works. They already did have their primary, they might have to do it again, but if Republicans get their way, it would go back to a similar map prior to the last election. That's where Dems would have 1 out of the 6 seats, Republicans would have 5. In Alabama, it looks like the current map might actually stay for this election. That would give Dems 2 out of the 7 seats. Republicans really want to go back to a 6-1 map, but we'll see what happens, especially after the midterms. Then you've got another blue state like New York. This map has already been changed multiple times since the last redistricting. In the last round, Dems did tweak it more in their favor, but they would ultimately like to completely wipe out the Republicans. They also supposedly have an independent commission. There's a whole process they'd have to go through to try to change it. But again, a lot of this comes down to the state Supreme Courts, and they could just get a ruling in their favor, and that's the end of it. But we can see here that they're trying to introduce 2 new redistricting amendments. It could take a couple of years, but Dems really want to go on the offensive in one of their own states. So that's a quick rundown of where things are at in most of the states. Personally, I think the gerrymandering is extremely ugly, and it really is a race to the bottom. The only good thing is I think it has captured the attention of almost everybody in every state across both sides. So hopefully that leads to a more bipartisan solution. So it certainly could get worse before it gets better, but hopefully over the next 2 or 4 years, something positive happens that really reins in the partisan gerrymandering. It's going to be difficult to actually agree on a solution because there's so many different things you can do. But just getting away from the most extreme stuff on both sides, I think would at least be somewhat of a win. So here's the table on Wikipedia. They estimate Republicans would gain 8 seats here. The big thing hurting the Dems here is that Virginia State Supreme Court overturning their ballot measure. That would give Dems 4 more seats. So there's a whole lot going on here. There's going to be a whole lot more going on over the next year. So hopefully that covers enough of what's going on. And that's a quick rundown of the updates of redistricting going on across the country. So let me know in the comments. What do you think about the ugliness of the process overall? Which state are you surprised didn't go far enough? Which other state did you think was going to get in on the action? What's going to happen with some of these court battles? And what do you think the overall solution is? Let me know what you think down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.